So provided nothing crazy happens this next turn, I should be able to pop Ancestral Anger onto him and hit really hard next turn. For now, he's got 2 blockers. Not good. Okay, that's fine though. Ooh, we got Monstrous Rage though. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go Crapless Forest, and we are going to go with Monstrous Rage onto the Picnic Ruiner. That's going to grant him Double Strike. Attack with both of those. Okay. Sure. I mean, a win's a win. But you're not even going to put up a fight? Alright, cool. How you doing? So today I have a Gruul deck for you. And that means it is a red and green deck. It is very low to the ground, effective, and most importantly, very budget friendly. This deck only has a handful of rares in it, one of them being a creature in the main board, and the other rares are actually in the mana base. So if you don't want to spend the budget on the mana base, you can just replace those with some basic lands if you don't want to spend the mana, or spend the money, I mean. So let's go take a look at what this deck is and how you can build it for yourself on a very, very cheap budget. Okay, so today we have a budget Gruul list. So this is part of my ongoing series to introduce new players to the game using cheap, easily craftable decks that can still get some wins and help you learn how the game is played. So this deck is very straightforward. It relies mostly on playing cheap creatures, pumping their health and damage up through spells or other synergies, and basically just beating the opponent up before they really get a chance to get a footing. So it runs 4 copies of Ancestral Anger, and this says 1 red, it's a sorcery. Target creature gains trample and gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of cards named Ancestral Anger in your graveyard. Draw a card. So basically, you want to try and cast 2 or 3 of these over the course of a game. So all that for only a single red mana is pretty good, and helps get your creatures to a higher damage point so that they can beat up the opponent. Next up, we have the Cacophony Scamp. This one starts small, but has a really good effect over the course of the game. So he's a 1 red mana for a 1/1 Phyrexian Goblin Warrior. And it says, whenever Cacophony Scamp deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it. If you do, proliferate. And proliferate means anything that already has a counter on it, give it 1 more of those counters. So we're talking poison counters, +1/+1 counters, counters for sagas, anything that has a counter of any kind, you can increase the number of those counters by 1. When Cacophony Scamp dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So if this has a +1/+1 counter on it, or it has like a modifier that says like its power is like 3 or 4, when it dies, you can have that damage go to any target. So you can hit enemy planeswalker, enemy creatures, the enemy face. Like, it's pretty strong for only 1 red mana. Next up, we have Kumano Faces Kakazan. This is a 3-part saga. 1 red mana. It says, Kumano Faces Kakazan deals 1 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control. And that happens the turn you play it. The next turn is when this saga ticks up to part 2 of the saga. And it says, when you cast your next creature spell this turn, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So this is a great card to play on turn 1, so that you can roll that +1/+1 counter onto a creature the following turn. And then part 3 is exile this saga, then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. And it comes back as Etching of Kumano, which is a 2/2 human shaman with haste. And it says, if a creature dealt damage this turn by a source you controlled would die, exile it instead. So this is a great card for shutting down enemy on death triggers. So like the Cacophony Scamp here has a trigger when it dies. Etching of Kumano would shut that down, make it so it doesn't happen. So pretty cool effect. Again, we're seeing a theme here. Really strong card for only a single red mana. Next up, we're looking at the Mirror and Bane Splitter. So this one is interesting. This is the kind of card that you would only really get effect from it when you first play it. The equip cost being 3 for only a net benefit of only +2 power, not that hot. But the fact that you can flash this in at any time to give any creature +2/+0 is really strong. So it says 1 red, artifact equipment, flash. Flash means you can cast it at any time. When Mirror and Bane Splitter enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. So instead of just playing it on the battlefield as an equipment, you can just play it at any time to give any creature +2/+0. Monastery Swift Spear, we've seen this before. This is a 1/2 with haste and prowess for a single red mana. Then we have Monstrous Rage. For a single red mana, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Create a monster roll token attached to it. And what that roll does is it's a token enchantment that gives +1/+1 and trample to any creature. So for example, if you take Monstrous Rage and you cast it onto Monastery Swift Spear, first off, the Monastery Swift Spear will immediately get +1/+1 because of its own prowess ability. Then it's going to get +2/+0 from the Monstrous Rage, making this from a 1/2 to a 2/3 to a 4/3. And then the token enchantment is going to get attached to the Swift Spear for an additional +1, making it into a 5/4 trample for a total investment of only 2 red mana. How that is fair, I have no idea. It is absolutely bonkers. So it's not fair, but we're not playing fair when we're playing these two cards together. It's just too strong. Next up, we have 4 copies of Audacity. This is typically a card you usually only see in like enchantment decks. Like the green-white enchantment deck really loves this card, but this card has its uses here as well. So for a single green mana, it's an enchantment. And it says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0 and has trample. When Audacity is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So really good card. So for a single green, you get to give any creature +2 damage and trample. So that means any damage that exceeds the amount of health the blocking creature has, that extra damage gets transferred to the opponent's face instead. So if you're coming in with like a 5 power creature with trample and the opponent blocks with a 3 toughness creature, it's going to kill that creature and then deal 2 additional damage to the opponent's face. It's pretty good. And the fact that it draws you a card when it leaves the battlefield is really, really good. Next up, we have 3 copies of Giant Growth. It's probably one of the most simple cards in the entire deck. It's just 1 green mana, instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Make something big. Then, oh, actually, there's 4 Giant Growths in here. One of them is from a different set. Then we have 4 copies of Picnic Ruiner. This guy right here, this guy ends games before they can start. You're very seldomly going to be playing this late. You're going to play this early because you want to get this guy big as quickly as possible, because whenever you attack with any creature that has 4 or more attack power, when this guy's on the table, he gets double strike. So if you make him bigger, let's say you have Picnic Ruiner on the table and you cast Giant Growth on him, it'll make him into a 5/5. And then when you go to attack, he's going to gain double strike, which means he's going to hit the opponent twice. So you turn that 5 damage into 10. Really, really good. He does have an adventure on him called Stolen Goodies. For 3 colors and a green, you can distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. So it is a good effect. But in most games, you're not going to be holding him in your hand that long to actually use the sorcery. You're mostly just going to want to get him on the table as quickly as possible. Next up, we have 4 copies of Questing Druid. This is a 1/1 creature for a colorless and green, and it says, whenever you cast a spell that's white, blue, black, or red, put a +1/+1 counter on Questing Druid. Basically, this guy wants to play with other colors. He gets a +1 for every, basically, non-green spell you play. And he has an adventure that says Seek the Beast. For a colorless and a green, instant, exile the top 2 cards of your library until your next end step. You may play those cards. So you get a little bit of card draw off of it, and you have a pretty decent card. So basically the way adventures work is you can cast the adventure side of this card first, and it's going to exile the card. Which means it's going to go into like a different zone. It's not going to go to the graveyard. It's going to go to a specialized zone that you can cast the other side of the card from. So typically, you want to cast the adventure, get the effect from the adventure, and then cast the creature that the adventure is attached to later. Next up, Yavimaya Iconoclast. This one is a pretty straightforward card, but it can be really good in the right situations. So for colorless and a green, you get a 3/2 with trample, but it has a kicker cost of a single red. So if you want to play 3 mana for this instead of 2, you can have it come in with an additional +1/+1 and haste for that turn. So you can either pay 2 mana for a 3/2 trample, or pay 3 mana for a 4/3 trample haste. Pretty good. Now, you may be noticing that this deck is all commons and uncommons, save for the Questing Druid, which means that all the rest of the rares are pretty much in the mana base. So you can build this deck really, really easily with just 4 rare wildcards. And if you just want your mana base to just be basic forests and basic mountains to save yourself some wildcard budget, you can totally do that. Because you're just running Carpelson Forests, Copperline Gorge, and a single Soken'Zon as your rares in your mana base. So altogether, that's 4, 5, 9, 13 rares for this entire deck. It's a very, very cheap deck to build. So yeah, that's the deck right there. It's very straightforward. You put dudes on the table, you turn them sideways, and you hopefully profit. So let's go and take the deck out there and see how well it does. Okay, so we're looking at a Carpelson Forest, a Mountain, Ancestral Anger, Kumano Faces Kakazan, Picnic Ruiner, Questing Druid, and Yavimaya Iconoclast. So it's got some playables, so we'll go ahead and get it going. So we're going to start Mountain into Kumano. We'll likely run Picnic Ruiner on turn 2. Okay. Alright, so it's turn 2, which means we have part 2 of Kumano Faces Kakazan. So we're going to put that into play, and we're going to play the Picnic Ruiner as well. Alright, Ruiner comes in, is a 3/3. So provided nothing crazy happens this next turn, I should be able to pop Ancestral Anger onto him and hit really hard next turn. And he does have a blocker now. He's got 2 blockers. Not good. Okay, that's fine though. Ooh, we got Monstrous Rage though. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go Carpelson Forest, and we are going to go with Monstrous Rage onto the Picnic Ruiner. That's going to grant him double strike. And we are going to attack with both of those. Okay. Sure. I mean, a win's a win. But you're not even going to put up a fight? Alright, cool. Okay. So, this is clearly something we're going to have to throw back. Having only 1 land is not good. Okay, 2 lands is a little bit better. So, Cacophony Scamp, Monastery Swiftspear, Picnic Ruiner, Questing Druid, and Yavimaya Iconoclast. I think we're going to send the Iconoclast back, because I kind of wanted to keep the Questing Druid. Alright, send that back. Alright, Carpelson Forest or Soken'Zon. I think we'll play the Soken'Zon first. Drop a Monastery Swiftspear and attack for 1. Alright, they drop a Mountain. Now, Either they want to develop their own 1-drop, or maybe kill my Swift Spear. Oh no, they want to play a Kumano. I would have done the same. Ooh, here we go. Alright, let's go here. We're going to go with Kumano faces Kakazan. It's going to give him +1/+1 because of prowess. We're also going to play the Cacophony Scamp, paying 1 red mana and taking 1 point of damage to do it. And we attack for 2. Okay, lightning strike on the Swift Spear. Kind of expected to see that. Ooh, okay. Alright, so we're going to play the Picnic Ruiner this turn, because I want to get that +1/+1 counter on them. And attack for 1 with the Scamp. And yes, we will proliferate. Take action to proliferate here and here. And Scamp will deal 1 damage there. So, if they do decide to attack me, I'm definitely going to just let it go through. I'm not too worried about 2 points of damage from him. That makes things a little bit more difficult, though. But that's okay. Because Picnic Ruiner is going to get really, really harsh this turn. Alright, Picnic Ruiner gets a double strike because of the bonus to its damage. Boom, boom. Down to 2. God, that's harsh. That's really harsh right there. So, whenever this guy attacks and he has a power of 4, or if you have another creature with a power of 4, he gets double strike until end of turn. He's really nasty. I think our opponent might be landlocked as well. Okay, lightning strike there. Luckily for me, the Picnic Ruiner is outside the range. Why didn't you attack? Okay, I guess it was game over for him anyways. Okay, so we're looking at a Copperline Gorge and a Carpelson Forest. We also have an Ancestral Anger, Audacity, Giant Growth, Questing Druid, and Yavimaya Iconoclast. We don't really have any good turn 1 plays here. We got a bunch of stuff to like pump things up once they hit the board, but a pretty weak opening hit. So we're gonna mulligan this. Okay, so that's a little bit worse, but I don't want to go any lower than this. So we're gonna keep this, and we're gonna send the Iconoclast back. Alright, Carpelson Forest comes out, and we're going to play the Kumano faces Kakazan. The board is even at 19 health. What are they going to play? Swamp. Okay. So holding that 1 black mana open because they probably want to use a cut down. So I'm going to play Picnic Ruiner instead, because it's going to come in with a +1/+1 counter on it, putting it outside of range of cut down. Okay. Blue and black. Okay, I'm just going to cast Over the Thread. That works too. Okay. Got that right there. So what we can do here is we can cast Audacity onto here. Pay for it. And I think we're also just going to cast the Cacophony Scamp. And we're going to attack for 4. So as you can see, this deck is all about just pumping the power of your creatures. Not so much about dealing direct damage with spells, but more about just making creatures huge. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to attack with both of these, keeping the mana open for the Mirror and Bane Splitter. Okay, so he wants to cast that there. So I'm going to flash in the Bane Splitter, pop it right there. Alright, so they go to 11. We draw a card off of Audacity. We will decline to sacrifice the Scamp. And we'll end the turn. By Otawara into a cut down. Okay. Alright, the scamp will now deal 3 damage right there to your face. Boom. Alright. Alright, cool. So we got a land. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to exile the Questing Druid to look at the next 2 cards in my library. Oh, our opponent says no thank you and is going to counterspell it. That's fine. We'll play our forest anyways. Mountain, and this game's over. We have run out of the gas. Okay, so we're looking at 3 Carpelson Forests, so we're going to be hitting ourselves pretty hard with this hand. But it's a decent hand, though. So you got a Swift Spear, Monstrous Rage, Questing Druid, and Iconoclast. So we can cast the entire hand with this hand. Well, we have enough mana to cast this entire hand, so I think we're going to keep it. Oh, that's pretty cool. You click on the little guy and it lights up. Okay, so looks like we're up against soldiers. That's pretty cool. Alright, let's go and play the other Carpelson Forest. Get a Monstrous Rage onto here. And we attack for 5. And end the turn. Alright, they play a Fortified Beachhead. Yes. Do they want to attack? Looks like they do. Alright, sure. Come on in for 2. Ow. Alright, my turn. We're going to play another Carpelson Forest. And let's see here. Let's go ahead and play... I kind of want to go with the Cacophony Scamp right now because they're representing counterspell mana. And then we are going to attack for 2. Okay, they want to cast Fading Hope. Okay, that's fine. Alright. Fading Hope bounced a creature with a 1 or fewer CMC. Or actually, I think it's 3 or fewer. Yeah, 3 or fewer CMC. So that allows them to scry as well. It's a pretty strong card. Let's see if they're going to try and tap out this turn. Alright, they want to attack. I'll choose not to block. Alright, 2 damage. Alright, so let's see here. We'll just go with the Monastery Swift Spear. Questing Druid gets a +1 counter because I played a red spell. And then we're going to cast Ancestral Anger, targeting here. Auto pay for it. Monastery Swift Spear gets +1/+1. Questing Druid gets another +1 counter. Cacophony Scamp gets +X/+O, where X is 1 plus the number of cards named Ancestral Anger in my graveyard, and then I draw a card. Ancestral Anger is a pretty cool card. It does a lot for only 1 red mana. Okay, cool. You can get a mountain. Just play that mountain. And now we're just going to attack. And wait to see what they do. Resolute Reinforcements. Okay. Bring them in. And how are you going to use those creatures to block? What you gonna do? The Cacophony Scamp is already trampling, so if you choose to block that, you're still taking 1 damage. Okay, so he's gonna block with both. Okay. I'm totally fine with that. So, those both are going to die into the Cacophony Scamp. I'm going to give this Monstrous Rage. Questing Druid gets bigger, and so does the Monastery Swift Spear. All your creatures die. I'm going to do 2 more damage right there. Get rid of that. And that puts them down to 4 health. If they don't pull something crazy out of their ass this turn, it's game over. Alright, they've chosen not to do anything. So we are going to cast Kumano Faces Kakazan. Questing Druid and Swift Spear both grow by 1 point. Kumano Faces Kakazan deals 1 damage to the opponent. And then we will play the Yavimaya Iconoclast with Kicker. Pay for it. Alright, it comes in. Kicker happens, giving it a +1/+1 and haste this turn. And our opponent says, no more. Stop, I'm already dead. Okay, and we are back with the post-game wrap, and I do have some thoughts regarding this deck, and they're good, and also not so good. So, if you are watching this deck after watching my showcase of the budget mono red deck, you may notice that this deck is not as good. And you were right. So, well, here's the thing with this deck, is this deck has a lot of really cool synergies, and it can absolutely pop off. But the thing is with this deck is, if your game plan gets disrupted with like a lot of removal, you're kind of dead in the water, because this deck doesn't support as many like haste creatures and direct damage as mono red does, because the fact that this deck wants to focus more on increasing the power of your attacking creatures rather than just dealing raw damage through direct damage burn, that makes it a little bit less impressive. It can absolutely pop off with a well-placed Picnic Ruiner or a Monastery Swiftspear with the right support in your hand, and it can absolutely nab wins for you. But if you're looking for just raw winning potential, you might want to stick with the mono red version of this build. But this deck is a very fun build to play. I will absolutely give you that. Having access to cards like Audacity and Giant Growth for very sneaky wins is very good. The Questing Druid itself can absolutely grow out of hand because you're casting so many really cheap red spells with this deck. Like, you can get him up to like 5 or 6 power pretty easily over the course of like 1 or 2 turns. Yavimaya Iconoclast is another pretty cool card because the fact that if you pay the kicker cost, you can have it swing in for 4 trampling damage immediately. So that's pretty cool too. The fact that Audacity draws you cards when it goes to the graveyard is very fun as well. You do like being able to reload your hand. Ancestral Anger, drawing cards when it's cast as well, is very strong. But honestly, for what we're working with here, while this deck is fun and it's a little bit different and honestly cheaper to build than mono red, I would probably still recommend mono red over this just because of the fact that it has that added reach of burn spells and more haste creatures. So that's my thoughts on this deck. I would say give it a shot. See if this is a playstyle that is more to your liking. Or just go play the mono red burn that I gave to you guys a couple days ago. I will continue to keep putting out more budget builds for all of you new players coming to the game, so do keep an eye on the channel for that. But aside from that, that's the deck. I'll put a link to a deck list in the description box down below so you can try it out for yourself. And until next time, take care of yourself.